Hello there. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Happy Saturday. It's episode 80, and it's going to be a good one. Today is panel day, which means that we are going to be installing paneling in all of our religious sectors of our minds. We're going to be using a interesting kind of... No, I'm just kidding. Today's an episode about anointment, the anointing. Specifically, what that even means, what that word means, how it works, how it doesn't work, and how we came up with that word. First of all, let me say hi to chat. Hello, chat. I take it everyone can hear me. No one's complaining that there's no audio, I hope. It could be worse. You guys could be celebrating that there's no audio, but it would appear that everything is good. It's a good day to ground. It's a good day to have a deep breath and ground. As we set the breath, we set the pace, our heartbeat. If we could hear our heartbeat, I keep imagining that if I knew when my heart was beating, that if I was to do something in exact solidarity with it, I could then pace my heart that way. So if my heartbeat was going this fast, I could move my body this fast in a certain way and then pace it down. That's, after all, what a politician does. That's their entire job, is to... this looks kind of gravelly, doesn't it? But yeah, we can control our heart rate. We can control our breathing. We can control the flow of cranial spinal fluid. Do you guys know that your brain pulses? It pulses with the flow of water and monoatomic potassium. And that is what we are going to talk about today. But before that, I got to say thank you so much to Duck Bear, just a thanks, and to City of Maple Bear. Gosh, man, the bears, the sleuth is in the house. And I think that I know there's another one before that. And it won't let me scroll up, but thank you so much. I will get the last person on the next one. The anointing. We have been told for a long time that there is something called a Messiah, and that the Messiah is the Savior, usually immaculate conceived Son of God, things like that. But before it meant all that, not to say it doesn't mean that, but before it meant all that, Messiah meant anointed. Mashiach, right? It meant anointed one, the one who is anointed, Messiah. And as I've been studying this whole concept of Messiahs, and aperture, I should say, as we've been talking about this aperture, it makes me wonder if one was not able to behold or hear the Word of God, could one do so with enough of an aperture? Could you open your aperture enough to where you could perceive, hear, listen to, or find communion with God? Thanks, Lorianne, for the super chat. Thanks, James. Thank you. Can we find that communion through aperture? Now, we know that meth heads have an increased aperture. We've been talking about this. We know that paranoid schizophrenics have an increased aperture. We know that people who claim to see demons and hear voices and suffer from even certain migraines all have an aperture feature to themselves. And we call this feature hallucinations, and we drug it. In fact, all of our drugs that we throw at them, all of our psychotropic drugs, are designed to limit the flow of dopamine, to constrict that aperture, to stop it from dilating. If you've been following me in my work, please see the live stream Eye of Ra. You will see that I have proposed that there are two methods of opening that the body uses to control the aperture. It's technically three, but those two methods are, one is melanin It's the pigment that absorbs light. We have it in the back of our retinas. We have it in our ears. Melanin will flood your sensory organ to prevent you from seeing things that you were afraid of. That is the first type of aperture leaning. The more afraid you are of something, the less likely you will perceive it, because your amygdala is like going, dude, this is a PG-13 guy and you're showing him rated R content. If you show him that, he's going to freeze and he's going to get killed. He's going to die. So don't show him that data. Just don't show it to him, right? And we've worked through this idea of the aperture and how this works. And these mechanisms that we see, dopamine constriction through the retinas and melanin, are the two main things that seem to be adjusting to our aperture. Additionally, we've spoken a lot about the polyvagal nerve, right? This nerve system that wraps around all your organs, your lungs, your spleen, your heart, and it literally squeezes you when it's necessary, right? We've learned that the flow of blood will move from your digestive tract into your muscles when you go into shock, so that you're embracing, you are ready for flight. You are ready for your reptilian core to act. We have learned that the neocortex is a quarter of a second behind your limbic system, and therefore your limbic system has an unabridged perception of life itself, that the neocortex comes in and floods with, hey man, calm down, don't freak out, everything's going to be okay. That's not actually a demon you're seeing, nor is it a voice you're hearing. All this is in your imagination. We have this throttle to help us survive. And when you have 17 people in a room and only one of them hears a voice, we call that person crazy. That's how it works on Dojo Earth right now, because we haven't learned the compassion for that yet. But there are those who do not think that those voices are crazy. There are those out there that are necromancers, someone who can see, perceive, and expunge, i.e. help demons. These necromancers have been seen throughout history. Jesus was a necromancer. And if you followed my work, we've seen at least 36 passages in the Bible that show you where Jesus was expunging, solving, helping demons that he perceived in the world that other people did not. But because he was Christ, we did not question him. You cannot call Christ crazy. If you do that, you're going to have a bad time. So instead, we've learned to realize maybe there's something to this. Maybe instead of everyone being crazy, now that Christ is here, we can now start to look at this stuff and realize that maybe it could be true. And I think that really does put us up to where we are right now, where we are as we prepare for our discussion, which is about to start any second. Benjamin has entered the bullpen, and I'm just waiting for his audio to connect so I can mute him just in case the audio kicks on. But we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the mechanisms involved with this. We're going to talk about the electrical connections that happen inside the body that could or could not adjust your aperture, and which is why our topic today is over the anointed ones. Because as it turns out, the oil that's used to anoint, I am going to suggest to you, and some other people are going to either agree or disagree, that anointment oil is also part of a mechanism used to open your aperture. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to unmute everyone here now, and let's get our panel out. Let me see, I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say unmute. Guys, if you can hear me, let's go ahead and unmute, and you can start your videos. I'm going to keep mine off only because I've already got a video on my main screen, and we've got Richard. Some of you guys know Richard in chat is Ceiling Fan Man. We've got Lucas, LC King. He runs a YouTube channel, which I just saw last night, which is really sweet. And we've got the effervescent Benjamin Balderson, who is connecting to audio as we talk. So welcome, guys. Glad to have you here. Benjamin's still coming in. Lucas, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Richard, it's weird to see you on the other side of the show, but we're glad to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's weird being on this side also.
I understand.
But thank you for inviting me.
I understand. And Benjamin, the one guy that isn't going to have a weird issue being on this side, is the one that we're waiting for still to join. So, did you guys hear my intro? Couldn't tell.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good. Then, sorry, forgive me, Andrea Fagan. You just gave me a super chat, and I just want to say thank you. That's really sweet. Thank you much for that. I appreciate that. Okay, so it looks like Benjamin's having trouble connecting to his audio, so I don't even know if we're going to even be able to get him in here today. I hope so. Let me see where he is. Seen the unseen, the combustion of two. Wow, he's just posted a link here that's really cool. It's going to be two resins. Yep, frankincense and myrrh. All right, great. All right, so in case we don't have Benjamin, we may not even get Benjamin today. The anointment that I'm speaking of is the Mashiach was anointed in a holy oil. His entire body was covered in this oil. And I believe that there is something in this oil that would cause his pores on his skin to dilate, to open, and B, the perhaps the fat in his skin would absorb the cannabinoids that were infused in this holy oil, and would basically cause the Anointed One, the Mashiach, to dilate. His aperture would open, and he would see what we call right now hallucinations, which are in fact just data that's in the world that we have been fearing to see, fearing to understand, feeling to embrace.
Hey, James, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
It's me on the screen, not you. If that's supposed to be, if that's an error, I think.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, Richard. I was trying to click on that, but because I was talking, I was going to finish what I was going to say. Then I was going to click over here and change it.
I apologize.
That's okay. But yeah, I do appreciate that. I just I can't do two things at once.
Neither.
I've learned that's a bad. So sorry to make you be the person that was stared at there for a while. With all that said, Lucas, do you have any opening remarks on anything that I've just mentioned?
Not yet.
Okay, great. Can you tell us about your channel, Lucas? Because you have some interesting things about electricity.
Yeah, so basically what I've been doing is doing a flat earth model based on a battery. So what I did was I found the galvanic cell and the thermogalvanic cell, so the two types of batteries, and I've just been applying them. So that's basically what my channel's about, and just sort of unraveling all the information that's come from that.
And tell me about the battery again. How are you creating the battery?
So a battery's basically made of 4 components, and it's got an electrolyte, which is a salt water. It has a salt bridge that joins 2 electrolyte bodies together, and then it has an anode, which would be the negative terminal, and a cathode, which is the positive terminal. So that's a galvanic battery, and the other side of the other one is a thermogalvanic battery, which is consists of an anode and a cathode, so a positive and a negative terminal, and an electrolyte, so it doesn't need the salt bridge. So the first one, the galvanic cell, uses electrochemical processes. The second one still uses electrochemical processes, but it needs a heat differential. So one side needs, so the anode would be cold and the cathode would be hot. And that's how electricity is created in that one. So when you place them upon the flat earth model, what you get is basically the electrolyte turns into the salt water or the oceans, and the rising, I call it atmospheric electrolytes. So as the sun heats up the oceans, then that lifts up into the air. The salt bridge would become the earth, and the anode is the moon, so the negative terminal, and the sun is the cathode or positive terminal.
And the earth is the ground, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's the salt bridge, which is the ground, and in the cell itself, that would be the neutral. So where the positive and negative join together.
Does that make the earth the electrolyte? Or it's actually the plasma atmosphere, I guess, would be the electrolyte, wouldn't it? The atmosphere itself, the plasma in the atmosphere, the movement of...
The fluid. The fluid is the electrolyte.
Right.
So the atmosphere, even though we don't think of it as fluid,
right,
everything in there, all the gases, when you bring them down, are fluid, whether it's carbon dioxide, oxygen, all of it.
Yeah, exactly. So in that case, I that's basically what I meant. Is that I know it's called atmosphere, but in this case, it would be the that fluid medium that occurs. Benjamin, it's good to see you. I'm glad you got in. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, it was apparently lagging on me there. It was telling me that I couldn't get in, and then I think I missed it for just a second, because then I went off and I was reading on the effects of myrrh on receptors.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
And I was reading a fascinating article on that, and just sorry. And what's up, Lucas?
Hi, how are you?
Fantastic. Love hearing that explanation. It's people don't realize in so many different ways, and that's what we're going to go through today, that as above, so below, everything just kind of works the same. And the planet, as Lucas is explaining, and our human bodies, they're all just batteries. Everything's running off of energy and electricity, and it all kind of works basically the same.
Yeah, well, Benjamin, I don't know if you heard my little spiel about anointment and being anointed, and as it relates to aperture before we started, but I was hoping that we could find a way to insert that into this conversation as it deals with the electrical process of opening the aperture, the electrical process of being anointed. That anointing was not just a ritual where I want to feel smooth. Please rub something smooth on my body now so I can feel slippery. This was not a slip and slide Messiah.
You sure it wasn't for the
thing.
Smell?
Nor was it
I'd like
for
to
the
smell nice.
It could be for the smell. It depends on how bad they smell. But basically, yes, I would like for us all to enter the speculation chamber and think about how this anointment, especially the ingredients that were used, to kick it off. Not too long ago, a Jewish, Judaic, Talmudic, it depends on what words you want to use here, an ancient altar was found that had cannabis residue basically on it. And this residue is making people think, so much so that Miguel Conner had the most fascinating talk last week on this. I showed it to Benjamin. Benjamin found it interesting too. And we just wanted to build on that great conversation. In fact, Miguel will be joining us here in a little bit to fill in any details we might have missed. But basically, I was hoping we could talk more about this today. How would this work? How could this system work inside the body? What do you think, Benjamin?
Oh man, and this is exactly where I kind of got lost there for a second, because I was reading, such material, and holy cow. So just specifically the frankincense and myrrh. So these are both derived from an olive plant, the bark of an olive plant. Both of them increase your blood circulation, and they're used in different cancer treatments, and they're used in blood stasis. So they really get your system flowing. Both of them also are anti-inflammatories. Myrrh specifically has a steroid called glucosterone. So this is just getting your whole body relaxed and flowing and your whole system wide open. Now, what it's also doing is frankincense itself opens up the TRPV3 channel in the brain. So which is a cannabinoid path. So this is opening up the pathways for cannabinoids and activating the receptors. So basically it's warming them up. It also is opening up and warming up opioid receptors. And myrrh is doing the exact same thing. They're doing it in a combination. And actually, I sent you a link. There's a study, a huge study, where the two work symbiotically and open up these different pathways, because anytime you have something, you've got multiple pathways that are doing a similar action. And this is just opening up the whole schmear. So any type of cannabinoid, be it out of, which actually frankincense itself actually has a cannabinoid. It's not just cannabis plants themselves that contain cannabinoids. So that itself even contains a cannabinoid, but it's basically, if you're looking at it electrically, the higher you get the voltage, the easier it is for amperage to flow down it. So all these components, right here have absolutely just wide opened that path. It's like they've cranked the voltage way up. So any bit of amperage that flows down it, any bit of cannabinoid, any bit of opioid that flows down those pathways is just going to have screaming success. It's going to have so much power. Now, for the two cinnamons, and I say two cinnamons because after studying this, so they call cassia and cinnamon are the other two components. We're going to say Ceylon cinnamon for cinnamon, because cassia is known as poor man's cinnamon. And they're both derived, again, from a tree that's basically a cousin tree. These two are the cinnamon trees. The other two were olive trees. So we're also, again, getting a symbiosis and combination. Also, funny thing, in the myrrh and frankincense combination, one was more specific to Indonesia, China, and Vietnam, like in the Ceylon cinnamon, and I believe it was the frankincense, and then the other two were more prone to India and things. So this was also probably an availability. If you were trading with one country and not another, you had availability to one, where Ceylon cinnamon and cassia were close, so if you couldn't get one, you could get the other. But ideally, they work in symbiosis. So with cassia, it's used to treat blood sugar. It's in the 50 fundamental traditional Chinese medicines. It's in Ayurvedic medicine. It's used as a thermogenic, a purgative, an expectorant. It treats ulcers, and here's where it also gets real interesting, is it treats tuberculosis, bronchitis, anemia, blood circulation, PMS. It's a sun herb, and magically it's used for consecration, protection, and psychic connection. And specifically, I found that it's good for clearing in conjunction with frankincense specifically, and this is the fire element on it.
So did you say that the frankincense is the one that has the cannabinoid in it?
Yes.
I don't want to interrupt you, Benjamin, but could you just tell us what a cannabinoid is? Because I don't know if people understand that there's actually, guys, there's physical equipment inside your body that's literally put there in hopes of finding cannabinoids in your life. Can you expand on that at all, Benjamin?
Yes. There's certain receptors that are inside of your body that when a cannabinoid, which is an oil that's removed from a plant, and there's numerous plants, peppers, frankincense, trees, Cannabis is the most well-known. That's part of why it's called a cannabinoid, because that's the most cannabinoid-rich plant that we know of. But there's many plants that have it. And this is a receptor in your brain that promotes different activities. And actually, your body will produce a very similar cannabinoid chemical in times that your body starts getting inflamed, or actually one of the reasons that they originally tried stating that cannabis would cause people to go crazy was because when you start having a mental breakdown, your brain will start producing a cannabinoid and flooding it across your brain and trying to light up those receptors, saying, calm the fuck down, man. And it relaxes you, it eases your body, it makes you receptive to things. So this is a natural component of your body that they took it as that was the psychotic break, but that was actually your body's defense to a psychotic break. Your brain's like, hey man, you're losing it, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, Miguel says can't get video to work.
Yeah, I just saw that. On that note, oh crap, I forgot my point.
Cannabinoids.
Thank you. On that note, I just want to paint people a picture of what we're talking about here. As one was to ingest a cannabinoid, there is a reaction. I'm going to use the word relaxation, but it's not really the perfect word. It's just the closest word I can come up with. There is a dilation that occurs in the body, a dilation where your pupils have in a sense opened up, and you are now seeing things that you could not necessarily see before. And what I'm trying to convey to you guys is that when you look at the role of the Anointed One, the Anointed One's job was to see things that others could not. He was sent in as a cipher, a literal human cipher, one who's there to connect and convey the Word of God. He was there to hear the voices. If you have enough compassion for my show, you realize this is not insulting to anything. But I am telling you that when you look at paranoid schizophrenia, when you look at the stories of Elijah and Ezekiel, when you look at what crystal meth heads go through, when you look at near-death experiences, when you look at near drownings, when you look at any kind of DMT releasing experience, in other words, where your body's going to stop inhibiting those DMTs, you are looking at someone that's perceiving a world that others cannot. That does not mean they're crazy. It means their aperture's opening. And these cannabinoids, these built-in receptors that are in your body, is how that mechanism works, or at least it's part of how that mechanism works. So none of this is about, we haven't gotten into the poisoning nature that a mushroom will do to your body. That's going to cause a certain DMT response. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the cannabinoid system here. Benjamin, if you can correct me in any way or elaborate, please do. I just want people to understand that this is a different doorway we're talking about. I'm not talking about the DMT ecstasy or acid or whatever thing. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about something that's built into your body and is there waiting. Go ahead.
Yes, we look at that. When James speaks about the aperture, the biggest enemy of the aperture, the thing that's going to make it close the most, is fear. And when he's explaining that there's a bunch of things around that you just don't see because you're not prepared, that's because it's too much for the mind to handle. So when I'm reading through that list and we see all these pathways that are getting opened up, and coupled with these pathways being opened up is an anti-inflammatory, a relaxation. All these things are very anti-fear. They're meant to put you in an almost sedative state where you're like, oh, I can handle this now, man. Now, the body naturally does that. Like if you've ever seen, look up the video where Steve-O, the Jackass dude or whatever from the Jackass show, he was doing a commercial and for a Nintendo Game Boy. And they wanted him to go sit in a tree inside of a lion's pen. And then some other dude was playing a Game Boy or something, riding an elephant or whatever. So he goes and sits on this tree, and they tell this guy that the lions won't climb the tree. And he's like, aren't they cats? And he goes and sits on the tree, and immediately this cat, lion jumps up there and snatches him by the back of the neck. And this dude said he would have never guessed it. Here's where it gets interesting. He went completely limp. He's like, I was so relaxed, just dead limp. He's like he had not a care in the damn world. Like, that lion was just going to eat me. It was cool. And this is a flooding of those chemicals, those compounds, an opening of all those receptors. You are a dead man, and you know it. Your body's like, it's cool. We're just going to open it up. We're just going to have a good time here till we die. It's all going to be good. Well, understand that when you're trying to receive this message that other people are not receiving, you're trying to open yourself up to these wavelengths that other people are not open to. You also need to mimic that reaction. So what you're looking at when you look at this combination of these anointing oils, and we start breaking down the different components and seeing specific pathways that it's opening up, we understand that this is a brew meant to basically mimic that same opening, that releasing of everything. Like, here's your right before you die. I'm wide open. I see everything I ever did. I see everything and how it happened, and I understand life because everything's wide open. And they're mimicking that same thing in this anointed person so they can try and receive those things but not die.
Yep. This is a formula. There is a formula, and you're not even really hacking the body, because you're utilizing the exact same pathways that have been there for a long time, that have been set there for a long time. Your body is an electrical instrument, and it can be altered and changed through voltage, through amperage, through all these things. Before we get back into this, I want to give a shout out to Illumi, Gaia Bear, NTS Bear, and OKC Guitar Bear for the super chats. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it. All of us do. Thank you for that. So you've said frankincense and you've said myrrh, which is freaking bizarre, because now you're telling me that when the wise man came, they were bringing what was necessary for the anointment, for an anointing. And I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm kind of wondering what happens if you freaking anoint a baby. Like, what happens to his aperture? Think about it. If instead of a baby being born where, hey, quick, cut his genitals off, what if instead you anointed him with frankincense and myrrh? What would be the reaction to his aperture to something like that, say, versus a trauma ceremony where you give him a Hep B shot and a vitamin K and send him on his way?
Crack him on the ass, tell him he's a little piece of crap. You bet. We are starting out, rather than encouraging the apertures to close and you to immediately find this world offensive. I mean, horribly offensive. You just cut my genitals. Are you serious? Because it's cleaner? Like, I can't move back a flap of skin and wash it? I mean, I'm pretty sure I got other skin flappies on my body that I need to move around and scrub under because I'm a big boy and I know how to take a shower. I mean, come on. Like, this is with little girls, you have to pull apart the pieces of their genitals and wipe out all the little crevices, or else they get an infection also. Why is wiping out a crevice that horrible? So we take, and it's on the very root. They've taken and attacked you at your root, which is where a baby starts out drawing all of their power from. They're a very root being. They're all about just eating and doing what the body needs it to do. So you've attacked that in so many ways. And on the flip side, they take this baby, show it love, make it very comfortable, because on top of opening up those receptors, do not discount the fact that it made you comfortable. It took away inflammation. Cinnamon historically is used to drive away negative energy or evil spirits. It's used in against demons. So in every way, it's like, here, little baby, welcome to the world. It's wonderful. Look. As compared to, here, little baby, crack, stick, chop your dick.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way to begin. And it's not even like, well, clearly the trauma would change that aperture opening, especially when you're that young. It would seem like it would be that much harder to get it to open up, just like our trust, because in a way, this aperture is compassion, it's trust. And that's definitely going to be harder to do if you have the opposite of anointment happening. So the frankincense is opening yourself up, but it has a cannabinoid itself, you said. And can you say again what you think the myrrh is doing?
And the myrrh is opening up similar channels, but it's not exactly the same channels. And then the myrrh seems to open up more heavily on the opioid reception side.
Okay.
So you
hang on a second, Benjamin. Sorry to interrupt, but that's another misconception that I think Americans have because of the fentanyl, because of the way that we do medicine now. I think people have missed that opium is not exactly what we've been told it is, that it actually has some pretty powerful aspects. Would you mind just elaborating a little bit on that to catch people up?
Absolutely. Historically, people need to understand that opium in and of itself, like its original just minor derivative where you're just basically milking a poppy plant, opium's, again, just like cannabis and cannabinoids, available in a variety of plants all across the world. The opium or the poppy plant is just the most well-known to have a dense, rich amount of opium that they can then make an extraction from. And that's where we start going sideways, is where they've got the dirty heroin extraction, and then they've taken and they've isolated down components where you're talking about your fentanyl and things like that. Well, you've taken away all the symbiosis that came with the rest of the plant, and you've taken it down to one component and made it a very dirty thing. But these things are natural things that throughout the history of man that we've used and have been a beneficial plant to us. Like, you take something like, say I'm out in the field and I break my leg and I don't have a hospital to go run to and grab some Percocets. It's obviously I'm going to want to be able to milk some poppy plants or do things, all kinds of situations are going to come up and if you've ever been in extreme pain is not open you up to things. As soon as somebody is in pain, you can literally see them start shrinking in on themselves, closing up. They start getting snappish at people. This is not a open state of mind. So there's two states that a living being is in. You're either into expansion or defense. When you're in defense, you cannot be in expansion. When you're expanding, you don't defend. So if you were in pain and you perceive the world as bad and not in your cells, just a basic cell, if a cell perceives its environment as hostile, it puts itself into defense mode because it doesn't want to get hurt. It wants to preserve what is there. That is the opposite of expansion. So each of these things is trying to put you in a relaxed, pain-free, where your body is free-flowing, all your electrical signals are flowing perfectly. This is an area where Lucas and all the electrical things are going to come in, because as your spinal fluid, as your whole body is, everything's flowing. Look at each one of these components also improved circulation, opened up your airways, used for asthma, bronchodilators. Every time it's a dilator in none of these instances is it closing things off. This entire concoction is opening up all these pathways, making you pain-free, relaxed. Hey, man, put yourself in the best position to receive this message that everybody else is too uptight to get.
Yep. So on that note, I want to clarify one thing. Correct me if you think I need correcting. It's actually not pain that closes your dilation. It's unresolved pain. That's what closes your aperture. And I'm only saying this, Benjamin, because you and I have had some pretty deep-ass talks about the Sundance ritual, Odin's ritual. I mean, come on, the crucifixion, the list goes on and on and on. Nobody is born into this world as a fucking Care Bear. The next thing you know, they're Jesus. It doesn't happen that way. There are no Care Bear Jesuses out there. This is the result of the opening of the aperture, and just think of it like the cervix in childbirth. You know, it's if you haven't squeezed out something that large, you're not going to be able to squeeze anything else out of it. You're not going to feel that you even have the ability. So I want to clarify that. That's why the circumcision, I think, is so traumatic, because it happens so young. In fact, if you were to truly go back to look at this, the beginnings of the circumcision ritual was the Pharaoh who was stepping out as a coming of age ritual. You know, a 13-year-old Pharaoh was coming out going, I can rule you. We'll prove it. I'm going to cut my genitals in front of you and I'm not going to cry. And everyone's like, oh, well, I just meant like make a promise about taxes. And he's like, it's too late. I'm already cutting my genitals now. And it would, you know, it truly, that was the ritual. And I think as time went on, I really like how Owen Benjamin explained this, that as time went on, that ritual was part of the Judaic tradition of manhood, but they wanted their child to not have to go through the ceremony of having to cut their own genitals. So it was done younger and younger and younger. And basically what you end up with is, after thousands of years, we're cutting each other's genitals off in this really cruel, inhumane way. But because it's tradition, because we evacuated ourselves to procedure, we weren't able to catch that little difference, which is, hey, whoa. The Pharaoh chose to do that. Little Billy's not choosing, you know, and that really brings to, I'm sorry I'm getting off a tangent here. I just want people to know that it's not necessarily that pain closes the aperture. It's the dissonance, our unresolving of that pain, which seems to be more of an effect on it. Which
I 100% agree, and I think that's an extremely valid point, because that's entirely different than like a Lakota that will take and go, and these people, they're mentally preparing themselves for this ceremony where they take the eagle claw and they put it through their chest, and they have to back up and actually rip it out of their own chest through their own power and their own force of will. These people are not, and that was, I've talked about that before, and actually one of the first things people always say is it must be the drugs around there. Actually, they are not allowed any drugs. Mm-hmm. They're not, they are completely clean and straight. They need to do that completely of their own internal fortitude. So that is a different deal. Absolutely. And it's a different step, and an amazing one, where rather than needing to be pain-free to find that place, you can find that place in the pain, through the pain, and actually because of the pain.
Yeah, it seems like the common denominator there really is do you choose to make that sacrifice of yourself, or is it done to you? Because if it's done to you, it's homicide and torture. If you do it to yourself, it's a ritualistic sacrifice resurrection. It's always comes down to consent, guys. It always comes down to consent with how this works, I think.
100%. And if you aren't freely doing it, even we're talking about the anointing, so a lot of this is coming out of biblical. Even in the Bible, it says, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Mm. Like if you're going out and painting your face and you're making fasting and doing sacrifice for show, well, then the appreciation that you're getting from the other people, that is your payment. You're not doing that for the actual internal, good things to try and progress yourself. So this is all very well covered in just about every cosmology. If you were not sacrificing to have that specific thing, I'm sacrificing myself to myself because I want to become Odin. I want to walk the Odin path and become something more. If I'm trying to get extra things out of that sacrifice, like, well, I'd like to become something more, but it'd also be cool if everybody thought I was awesome and I got a bunch of fame and money out of it and stuff. Well, guess what? You aren't going to get the first thing because that's not truly what you were doing the sacrifice for.
Yeah. So what kind of electrical things do you think happen under this kind of trauma ceremony? What electrolyte wise, anything wise, do you have any thoughts on that? Anybody?
Well, I thought, yeah, Lucas, if you want to jump in here, or Miguel, we haven't even heard him yet.
Yeah, Miguel's out, sadly. He couldn't get his audio to work, which is a bummer, but I really want to have him back. But yeah, I don't mean to leave anyone out. I realize, Lucas, the anointing thing is more not necessarily electrical, but yeah, if anyone has anything, definitely jump in.
Yeah, so the parallels between the sort of the battery and the cells is more to do with the potassium nitrate and the sodium chloride, so salt and potassium nitrate, and they're both part of the galvanic cell within the electrolyte type substance. So it's the cell membrane is basically acting like a salt bridge, like a barrier between these two salts that are in some ways you could think of them as a positive and negative salt. They're two different charges, and so when there's a differential between them, that's when you actually get when you sort of pull a positive and negative apart. That's when you get the electrical current, or the like the rubber band that wants to snap back. So when we eat sort of really healthy diets and things like that, and we have high amounts of, say, potassium, and we increase our potassium, most of us do lack potassium in our diets, then we can really sort of start charging our bodies up, and especially through the adrenals, which are basically like the battery pack for the body.
Yep. Yeah, that's I'm all about the adrenals. I would even argue that if you were to truly call one organ the cockpit of the body, I would actually not call it the heart. I would call it the adrenals. And I'm not even saying I'm right, but if you really think about what is a motorcycle, a motorcycle is a throttle and a brake, and everything else is just crotch. Where can I put my crotch where I won't burn myself right now? Like where can I sit on this thing? And it just feels like that the adrenals have always been that crucial part of who we are. In fact, I would say that it's the reason why your aperture opens or closes is based on your adrenal comfort level. It's your amygdala's running through that going, hey, how are the adrenals doing? The adrenals are like, holy fuck, there's a demon out, versus, yeah, man, it's all good. We got a demon 3 o'clock. He seems nice. He's just trapped in this zone after he was westing. He really wanted to resolve some trauma with this or with that, and everything's fine. And that's how your amygdala knows. Show him more data. Show him more data. It's okay. He can handle it. And so much of us are taught to be gelded out of our adrenals. It's always the adrenals. It's what the grappler fears the most is an empowered adrenal. It is a man's adrenals realized. And I think that's what makes us so potentially dangerous as sovereign citizens. It's actually why we fear our own power. It's because we feel how much goes through there. In fact, it's ironic because we just got a super chat asking this same question. It was John Z, why does my chest feel like it's going to explode sometimes? And John, first of all, there could be a grenade in your chest. But what I think that what you're referring to is that sometimes we have this adrenal flow that is so strong in our body that it feels like we're revved up and we're ready to go. But we're taught from a very young age that that's dangerous. We have to offload that power. We're not worthy of that power, and more so, we're not even trained in how to hold that power. That's why I actually bitch, guys. This is why I bitch about fear. This is why I say don't think of fear as a bad thing. It's because what typically happens when a regular male who's brought up in society, the first time they feel fear, they are afraid of that power. What they're really feeling is adrenaline. They're feeling adrenaline running through their system, and it scares them. Why? Because they're in a classroom all day long. They're sitting inside of a desk behind a classroom, and they're told to stifle that stuff. They only get it to come out at recess, and then there's all these stupid rules around it. There's no ability for a horse to bolt, is basically what it comes down to. So as we're trying to learn how to discover this anointing principle, so much of it comes down to learning how to be in your adrenals. If I could teach someone to do anything, it's to look for opportunities where you feel scared, where you feel nervous. Like if it's as simple as speaking in front of someone. Maybe one of you's nervous right now because we're talking in front of people, versus being up on a rock or riding really fast on your bicycle. All these are opportunities to feel the adrenal system flow and learn to be comfortable with that. As you become comfortable with that, I believe the dilation occurs and you're able to see and process basically more data at that point. Some kind of electrical thing's happening, I just don't know what.
So when you look at it, as you're feeling this pain and this fear and all these things are opening up and you're getting the adrenals aren't where you're getting your information so much from, but that's where you're getting your power from. That's why your chest hurts. You will literally shake. You're not shaking out of fear, because that happens when you're angry too. And you're not scared at all. That is recognize that that's your power waiting to just unleash. You're like that car at the beginning of the racetrack, just waiting to open up. Now, there's got to be a complete flow through your body, because as we've talked about before, you've got three minds, and you've got your etheric area and your dense, your salt area. Well, the two need to make that connection. So you see a lot of times when they're talking about things, they talk about the walking the pathway between your root up your spine, the 33 steps up your spine and blah, 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 coming up here to open things up, to open that pathway up. Then James brought up last night, which I was hoping you would have brought that up when you were talking, is then in that pathway is flooded with cerebral spinal fluid, or your electrolyte. As Lucas was just explaining, in that electrolyte is potassium. So this is where this charge is carrying, and all this information, your brain is telling your etheric mind is telling your root mind, hey man, this is what's going on. And your root mind's like, yeah, what are we going to do about it? And so the two need to have an open, flowing connection both ways. This is what we're opening up, is all this electrical signal. You're letting this entire pathway open, so you have the access to all of it, the information and the power, the positive and the negative. You're putting them together here in your heart chakra area. So it needs to go back and forth. Like Lucas was explaining, the electrical charge doesn't just come from one direction, it comes from the differential. So as it's rising and falling, that's where the power comes. If we just rose, there wouldn't be that differential fall like that where it's coming back and forth. We need this oscillation.
Yeah, but Benjamin, you can't be negative. So don't be talking about negative, okay? You just need to be positive all the time. And that's where you're going to get all your power. Don't you know that if you just take a battery and only use the positive side of it, that's where all your power is. You know that, right?
Exactly. Yes. Just rise. We're ascending, people. Ascending.
Right.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, you never get power. That's why I totally appreciate, rather than positive and negative, referring to it as cathode and anode. So that way it doesn't have those connotations that people want to put on it that, are pre-built in. Yeah. They can start just looking at it as the way electricity works, because that's how we work. We are an energetic being. We are just a battery.
Yep. Richard, you got something?
Well, it just the whole thing Yeah, it is fascinating about the whole electrical system because, you know, when you go into science, we're all particles and atoms and we're all put together electricity. When I find that the few times lately we've gotten together with other people that are resonating like we are higher, when we get together, there is an increased amount of energy put out. And I've seen it at least 3 different times now where I know that they put a lot of predictive stuff in movies, but you know, that whole thing in Star Wars where they go, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And I've seen that happen multiple times now where one or more of us, as it says in the Bible, got together and then we're able to do something in this construct of the universe, either with human people or whatever, or the actual universe itself and manifest things. I've seen it happen. So it's a real thing. And I believe that's also obviously why they want to separate us, whoever they are, because they don't want us to build that power. You know, it's like that I forget what those things are called. They're like the Tesla thing. It's a circle and you put your finger on it and electricity goes to it. And then if you put several fingers together, you really get you can feel the energy coming off of it. And I truly believe that's how we all are. The more of us that are together resonating this whatever we're doing, it increases that power, and that's partly why they do want to keep us apart. That was
well. To add to that, if that was true, Richard, I mean, pretty crazy thought you're talking about. But if that's true, that they really wanted to keep that away from us, it would mean that they would have had to have declared some sort of cannabinoid enabling plant illegal. Like they would have to have declared a war on some sort of like plant. And that's insane. That
Yeah.
No one would ever buy that. No one would ever consent to that.
No.
So I don't know, Richard. It doesn't look like you have a lot of being sarcastic people. It's exactly why I believe that that we've had a war on cannabis start at the exact same time that we started developing petroleum-based medicine. The idea that, hey, you need to put some oil in your body. Don't put a plant. You need to put some oil, some of this black oil in you. That's going to get you there. So what you're looking at is a systematic fight against your receptors, against your cannabinoids being stimulated in a natural way. And how does that affect your aperture across the zeitgeist? Because think about it. Your aperture is affected by everyone else's. Just as we said, you're going to be more comfortable if your aperture is going to be more open, the more comfortable you are. Well, if everyone's freaking out around you, if everyone's calling it hallucinations, you're not going to be as comfortable to hear those voices or to behold something that others can't, to pick up on these subtle energies of the world around us. I should stop talking now because someone in the chat says that I talk too much. Fine, dickhead. Go ahead, somebody.
Well, I was going to say that it's like the more whatever this process is, I hate all the labels, awakening, whatever. Mm-hmm. The more that I continue on this path, I'm finding all the answers in nature and none of the answers in medicine. And again, my wife has a medical background. She was a charge nurse for like 30 years until she retired. And she's finding that all the things that she's done as she's researching all these books and germ theory and stuff, they were all just ways to basically keep people in the system, treat the symptoms, but never heal them, and then just keep it in a loop so they make money off you. And then once I realized there's all these natural herbs, and I start talking to people, I was like, why is it if I go on, say, YouTube, and I start telling you about all the natural healing medicines and vitamins and stuff, you can get your channel taken off. But then the same person, I could go to the store today, go to a shelf, buy a bottle of white pills. I have no idea what's in them. I don't know who made them. I don't know if they'll actually help me, but that's normal. I'll just pop so many of those and everything's fine. I'm a normal human, right? I can drink as much alcohol as I want and pass out and crash your car, but don't touch that other plant you're talking about because that's dangerous. Whereas most of the time when somebody's on that, they're usually just laying back, hanging out and just meditating, whatever. They're not like thinking, okay, now let's go drive in a car. You know, it's fascinating. The more I go through this process, the healthier I feel I'm getting. I mean, just from changing my diet, not even dieting and exercise, but just changing your diet. My body's healing itself. It's fascinating how many things I've learned from everyone on how to heal yourself. So.
Yep.
And the fact that they cut things out of our body, that makes no sense. Like you guys were talking about earlier, the first thing you do to a baby is all this trauma. It's like I started thinking about, what do they call them? Vestigial organs? I forget how to say it. But it's like, really? I'm supposed to now believe that God made us perfect and added a bunch of parts like IKEA in case, something, So, you don't need this, you don't need that. I mean, they tell you the appendix is basically just something that's going to eventually get inflamed, and you have to cut it out or you'll die. I mean, why would he put that in there? See, like the wisdom teeth, you yank those out and chop things off your dick. And it's just like everything they're cutting and chopping. And now I realize it's all garbage, because God wouldn't make us like that to have parts be removed. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
The appendix, actually, I have an answer for that one, if I'm not mistaken. That's what John Brisson said, that stores a tiny amount of your stomach biome in it. So if in an instance that you eat something that your stomach needs to flush its whole biome, that the appendix then is supposed to dump out a little, after it's flushed out, dump out a little probiotic basically of what your biome was. So that way your stomach's able to rebuild its biome.
You're talking about a starter, like a yeast starter, aren't you?
Yes, exactly.
Holy shit,
fascinating,
man.
right?
The mother, right? Isn't that called the mother or something?
That's the mother, yes.
Wow. Lucas, did you have something on that? Okay, I thought you were, yeah.
No.
Well, I don't know why you guys are complaining. If you don't need two lungs, the reason why you were given an appendix is so a doctor can send his kid to school. I mean, that's actually why it's in there. How else are we gonna pay for all this stuff if we don't have a way for everyone to make money? Yeah, I think you guys are absolutely right. All the answers just keep showing up. Not to mention how much medicine is actually out there, just literally growing out of the ground. Literally.
Well, the fact is these doctors don't understand nutrition in any way. How are you going to tell me you're even a doctor and understand how the body works when you don't understand how the foods that I eat interact with my body and the things that it makes it do?
Yeah.
How are you going to tell me when you don't understand? Go ahead.
Absolutely. I'm saying something about that because my wife worked with a lot of them. There are so many obese doctors, which just fascinates me.
Yeah.
It's like they're going to tell you how to live your life and eat healthier and all that,
So
and then
right.
they go drink a Mountain Dew in the back room or something.
You're so right.
It's wild.
They also don't grow their own food. They also don't grow their own herbs, and also you cannot go to a hospital and go to the herb garden. You can't walk through the herb garden while you're waiting for an appointment at the hospital. You can't see nurses going in there going, hey, let's try this or let's try that. Not once are you ever allowed to prescribe cannabis for pain. Not once. It's always...
they would get in patients that had overdosed or gotten sick from drugs like heroin or meth or whatever. And so what would they get? They would show up. They would immediately get 3 meals a day and a maid to come in and take care of them, which is the nurse. And they would get a morphine drip. Mm-hmm. So like you go to the hospital, they're like, oh, you're on drugs? We'll give you better drugs. So then it was kind of like a getaway. So they'd heal them up enough so they could send them out the door and then repeat.
Yep.
And it's sad. It's a sad system.
Yep.
They set up.
Benjamin, I hate to put you on the spot, but this has been brought up a couple times in the chat. Do you have any thoughts on mugwort?
Mugwort is fantastic, isn't it? I'm actually making a mugwort mead, and I'm mixing a mugwort and cannabis and things. It's actually a poison. Like most of your psychoactive, like your things that you think of that are going to make you trip, they're poisoning. Now, when you get poisoned, your body alters itself, and you are going to see things slightly different because you're poisoned. This is no different than like people when they look at visions, that have visions when they got extremely sick. Well, you're basically just like when we were talking about with the anointing oil, where we're mimicking certain things. This poison is mimicking that sickness and altering your body. And mugwort is a poison. It's, they use it for heavy dreams, for visions. It's not a real strong poison, but it's definitely a poison. But it's definitely very useful in its fashion. I have a brew that I'm making at home that has some different components like that, and Mugwort's one of those components in it. I love it.
All right, good.
But this is kind of the opposite of the Anointed One thing, though, because in the Anointed One situation, we're almost putting you at that combination is putting you at your relaxed perfection. You are basically in a no pain, perfect relax, perfectly just ready. Where when you're doing it the other way, where you're taking, like, whether it's mushrooms or DMT or mescaline, any of these things, you're poisoning your body and forcing it to alter. So now, rather than becoming the prime state of what you are, you're actually seeing things from a slightly messed up state and taking it in from that angle. And because of that, you get to see things and understand things that you never would have understood before. So it's a useful tool, but understand it for what it is. Also, is that it's a poison that's relaxing you, putting you in a very it's a very dream state. Is the one that Mugwort's associated with real heavily. I actually eat chocolate bars with a little bit of Mugwort in it occasionally too. I like Mugwort.
Interesting.
I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For Benjamin. So, like you now, my house is probably loaded like yours. My wife's making tinctures of all different types of plants and so forth. But my question to you is, when I read in the Bible, one of the things that seems like when somebody's really sick or distressed or whatever, they talk about covering themselves in ash. And I know that the Catholics do something weird with ash, so I know it's connected somehow. But do you have any thoughts on why would they do that and why it's written? Anybody? I'm curious about
Yes.
And you're talking about potash, right? Is this potash, Benjamin?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, please.
So specifically, and this is not Christian cosmology, but in heathen cosmology, man was made from a tree. Okay. Now the mineral component that we were speaking of, that's the main one that when Lucas was talking about in a battery, and then James was speaking about in your cerebral spinal fluid, is potassium. That is your electrolyte. That's the salt that's holding the voltage. If you, in a battery, when the battery, you got your cathode, your anode, just a regular lead acid battery. Well, the charge is held inside the voltage part of the charge is held inside of the electrolytes, inside the salts of the electrolytes. I'm going to be making a video later today, recording it and loading it up this weekend. As a matter of fact, at home, my batteries, I live off grid. So my batteries, the electrolytes or the salts in them have worn out. So now if I don't have sun hitting it, charging my batteries, the voltage will immediately drop. Now on my battery bank, it still says my batteries are full of amperage because the amperage is still there. But the voltage that the potassium was holding, that's gone. Now, when you're talking about potash, man was made from an ash tree. An ash tree specifically is an extraordinarily hard wood. Last night when James brought this up offhand, because when I make potassium, I make it out of oak. In hardwoods, they carry in a special amount of high amount of potassiums. So oak came to the top of my head because that's what I use. But ash, which in heathen cosmology man was made from, is an extraordinarily hard wood that carries a ton of potassium. So when you are putting that potash on you, the salt, when you are trying to extract salts, you take the plant, in this case the tree, you burn it down to ash, and then you mix that with distilled water and filter it out, and the salt will be left in the distilled water. That salt has already been activated and released. That's why when forest fire comes, they say when the ash lands on you, it stings and it burns, because pure potassium is a caustic base. when you go to clean out your drains or something because they get a clog, that's actually pure potassium, and you're pouring that in, and the caustic base is eating away the stuff in there.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know that. Cool. Go ahead.
Right.
Sorry.
So if you want to make drain cleaner, just burn down some hardwood, use some oak out of your yard, mix it with distilled water, and then the water that's left, let the salt dry out and pour that salt down. That's your drain cleaner.
Yeah, you've had some videos where you actually show people this process. I don't know if you've actually made the potassium stuff, but I've seen you do this a lot on your channel. It's really great stuff, Benjamin.
You bet. It's when you start looking at all those things, like lye, I use that same I use that same salt to make soap, your lye soap, things like that. All these things that people pay so much money for, so cheap and easy at home, and you're really actually making them. Every time you make a little yard fire to burn off your branches in the spring and stuff, you could have been turning that into activated carbon. You could have turned that into lye, used it in soap. You could have been making all kinds of products, and instead you're going to the store and buying the activated carbon toothpaste, and paying $10 a tube because that's the good stuff. And it has this carbon in it that our carbon-based life form seems to react to. And you could just be doing all this at home. And
and the products you make are better and cheaper or less.
100%. 100%. You never go back after you get done.
No.
You're like,
my wife makes everything for us.
It's wonderful. And you could be doing all this for free, or not free, but very cheap. So when you're looking at the ash that they're rubbing on them, understand that the salts, the potassium salts, are going to be a giant component of that ash. The actual gray ash in and of itself is just cellular material that's been burnt. That's broken down cellular material. That's all that's left. It's the egg that everything was happening in. It's the salt ash in there that is what you're actually connecting. And that is absolutely what's making the bridge in your spinal fluid. That's your column. That's where all your signals, all your information is carried.
Yep. On that, I just wanted to quickly say that so your brain is suspended in fluid, and that fluid goes all the way down to your tail, all the way down to your sacrum. That's your cranial spinal fluid, and that is mostly water. It replenishes itself almost once a day, but inside that water is monoatomic potassium. And if you've been listening to Benjamin, you know that salt is where we store information. Your memories are stored inside this information. And you could think of this CSF fluid as almost like a rendering fluid, a informational rendering matrix fluid. Because it stretches all the way up and down your body, it's able to act as a rendering antenna, so to speak, a long, elongated antenna of salt that could be recalled over and over again. Think about it like you're storing information on your desktop, and then when you're done working on your files, you're now swiping your desktop clean because you want a clean desktop so you can start tomorrow. And your CSF is being replenished in the same way. And I'm not saying it works that way, but I'm saying it's interesting if you start to look at the electrical components that are actually involved in all this. The electrolyte is not an electrolyte. Remember, an electrolyte is basically water, clean water, distilled water, that then has something added to it. The actual substance itself that creates the reaction. Your anions and your cations, right? Your anodes and your cathodes. And the only difference there is one has more electrons than protons and one has more protons than electrons, assuming that we're buying into this whole, electron particle model of the world. It's almost like a scaffolding we use just to talk about it. So all of our reactions, including enlightenment, including opening these doors, are going to be electrical transactions that we make inside ourselves. This is why I bitch about ego all the time and not letting us shoot down our ego, because that's an electrical charge, and we will find ways to drain it if we're not careful, because we're living in a gelded society where we do all this to each other. So Think of all these things as electrical. Stop listening to words and just look at the prana economy underneath. What is the electrical transaction that people are trying to conduct underneath? That's really going to be the source of your arguments, the source of your hate, the source of your love. Someone's going to come in here and they want to disagree with someone, and they will find one of us and they will say that person is stupid. That person doesn't know what they're doing. That is an electrical transaction they need. They showed up this morning with an excess of electrolytes, right? An excess of electrons, negativity. They needed a prana economy, someone with a positive, a lot of potassium, so that they could say, you there, I'm going to call you an asshole so that I can expunge this negativity and we can have a transaction. And I really, really think, guys, that that's really what we're doing all the time. That's what our relationships are truly about. That's why some people can be in a sour mood one day and then in a very compassionate, open mood the next day. This is the prana economy, the electrical connections that are happening below the surface. All of this is electrical. Just like the world, just like Lucas was talking about with how the world works itself, with the atmosphere itself. These are electrical transactions, from thunderstorms, right, to lightning, to water flowing down a hill. All of this really does break down to there's a bunch of electrons that really want to get to a bunch of protons and vice versa.
And when we look at any kind of thing that you're doing in between the two, that's ohms. So when we're looking at any of these rituals, when we're looking at this Anointed One ritual, basically electrically, that's trying to remove the ohms. It's opening up the channel as wide as possible. All these things that the world is doing to you is trying to build the ohms. It's trying to stop that connection in and of yourself. Because the more the ohms are, the less connection you have, the more you're just going to hold down inside of yourself. These things, as you can see, why would it be good for the Anointed One to have all that open, but not for you to try and mimic that? Like that doesn't even make sense. He's going to get all these extra gifts and understandings and operate that much better as a person. As an electrician, I don't want all that ohms. Ohms creates heat and creates problems, and that's where you get damage and you lose power. Heat is ohms that is energy lost. When I send 100 amps from my starting point, and I only get 60 amps in my end point, that's ohms in heat transfer where my power isn't doing what I want it to do. It's doing something else entirely that's not only not beneficial, but actually damaging. Yep. So that's what they're creating in you.
I feel like we live in such an upside down world. Everything they do is to make sure that we're not connected to things. Because as I'm researching weeds, we spend as a society a lot of money and time invested to put poison on our grass to kill the quote weeds, which are probably the medicinal plants that could help us, that are growing for us. We kill all that. We plant garden or grass seed, and we grow that, and then we mow it, and then we throw it away. I mean, like, none of that makes sense in a society in that you're supposed to be connected to the earth. We're literally just throwing it out in the garbage can and not even looking at the things that are coming out that could help us. It's just a way to keep us down.
Weeds are not only beneficial to you, but one thing that people don't understand from a permaculture aspect, if my ground pH and my biome is proper, a weed will not grow in it. I do not weed my garden, people. Never. And because weeds do not grow in proper ground. I have clover beds that just cover my entire ground and good grass, things like that. Now, where you see the weeds crop up is in areas where the pH is off and where there's problems in the ground, where you have nutrient lock of one sort, nutrient lack. So when these weeds appear, what we notice is those weeds start bringing that back into balance. The weeds are reparative mechanisms for the earth, which is one of the things one of the reasons that I find the terrain theory fascinating, where exosomes, we consider them bad, the same as like a weed, but this is actually bringing the system back into balance. And we're attacking the mechanism and calling the mechanism that's reparative the evil thing, just like I was talking about earlier, where the cannabinoid or the cannabis type compound that would flood the brain in order to stop you from having a psychotic break was actually your brain's reaction to fix it. They called that the problem. And we seem to see that same trope over and over again, where the reparative mechanism is getting blamed for the initial problem.
Yeah, you're talking about the common cold. You're talking about the flu. You're talking about all the necessary things that we have in our body that are instrumental to helping us solve problems, and we're declaring a war on those systems itself as they work. It's truly insane. If you really look at what a virus is, probably a firefighter, and we are literally calling the cops on the firefighters and shooting them from the windows every time they show up for a fire. And our evidence is I can prove it. Watch. You watch. I'm going to set this building on fire, and those firemen are going to come. That proves they're the ones that started this fire. We got to fucking kill those guys. That's what we're doing. When we fight the common cold, when we fight the flu, when we cut out our appendix, when we go after our tonsils, all these things are wars on the very system that's trying to help. Look at cancer. Holy fuck, y'all. Look at how we deal with cancer. What's probably happening is the terrain theory. Something has entered into your terrain that's bad. Your body is doing an excellent fucking job going, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And we say, aha, we will destroy the dozers. We will destroy the very people that build our edible buildings that we can munch on as Muppets. If you guys don't know what I mean, that's okay. It's a very, very obscure reference to the dozers, but Fraggle Rock. But anyway, my point is that just like everyone has said here, what we think is medicine is actually a war on our bodies. It's a war on our immune system. This is why.
At least it wasn't as old as the Hanna-Barbera references.
Hey.
So does that make me old if I know what you both are talking about?
If we wait long enough, I'll go there. Don't think I won't do it. Don't think I won't. So, with that said, it's actually time to sign off on the public end of this. I would like to invite all of you guys. Today is Patron Day, and there's so many awesome comments here in the chat that if you guys want to stay on for a few minutes, I really think that there's people that are waiting to participate in the room that I know they'd have some awesome questions that would make some good video. We'll be recording that too. But I'm going to end the live stream now. A lot of bears have an appointment coming up in seven minutes with BB. But I'm gonna shut this down here. Before I do,
love you guys.
Before I do, can you guys tell us about your channels and stuff? Lucas, you have a channel called LC King on YouTube, and I'm sorry we didn't get as much into what you're doing because it's fascinating the things you're working on. Do you want to tell us about that right now?
Yeah, I can explain a little bit, but it's basically what we've been talking about with all the electricity, and it's me going through what I've been finding when as I research. So if you're interested in how the electricity applies to the flat Earth, then come and visit the channel and yes, check it out.
I encourage that too. I will definitely have a link.
I watch all of his videos, just saying.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, you turned me on to them last night, actually. I watched a couple of them, and I was really excited about this. So maybe we can even talk more about just specifically that topic next time. You guys can definitely find that link in the video description to his channel. I'll be adding it after this. Richard, can you go?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Tell us about you've started a channel, right? Ceiling Fan Man?
Yeah, I do a channel, and it's mostly just I kind of give my perspective on what's happening in everything that I'm seeing. And there's so many channels that they have, they have good information, but they're more almost fear-based, like everyone's coming to get you and someone's going to come down your driveway and shoot you with a needle. No, so it's like I look at it through what a lot of the teachings I've learned from watching you is opening up my aperture to compassion and also to the good parts of this. I mean, it truly is the best apocalypse ever. That's a great saying. And but that's kind of where I come from. I look at the quote craziness in the world, and then I see it from well, what's positive about it? And there's a lot of positive things going on. And the people that I've met in real life that are going through this, yeah, the whole world's in an uproar, but most of the people I've been talking to, in some way, their lives have all gotten better. And I think that's because we've opened our aperture to see things the way that they are. So my channel is sort of like a more remedial version of what you do, you know, for people that, because like I watched Benjamin, fascinating, man. I love you. And because we're doing all the same fermenting and all that stuff. I watched that. But then I watched the one that you had where you're discussing, like, I don't know, about how things start here and go here and doing that whole story. And my wife and I watched it. It's okay. We're going to come back to that like in a couple of months, you know, because I think that's just like a little bit out there still for me. So my stuff, I just try to make it more simplistic just because that's how I am. And the only reason I actually did the channel is because my wife gets sick of me just like talking to her all day long. So I start putting in a video just because I need to get it out. I get these thoughts in my head and somehow I feel compelled. So I put it together with a little humor, a little music, and I put little video clips at the end of memes, and I just try to have fun and help other people grow with whatever's happening to us. So that's what my channel in a nutshell.
It's a very entertaining channel, and I want you guys to know that Richard has this theory that all satellites are ceiling fans, and I think he's right. I've checked out the math, and I actually think that NASA could learn some things. I think they probably have. They've been watching him, and they've been going, you know, the Wicker satellite is coming next. We're going to do that. So definitely.
Well, if you look at the Mariner 9, that's where my name came from. If you check out the Mariner 9 as it's flying around Mars, and it's an official NASA photo, it not only looks like a ceiling fan, but you can even, it's on my avatar, you can even see the light chain. I mean, so you can see stars at night, I guess.
Nice. All right, Benjamin.
That's good stuff.
Sign us off, buddy.
And
tell us about your
I've
channel.
got, and my channel's under Benjamin Balderson. I've been trying to do some live videos, but YouTube's apparently messing with me, keeps telling me I didn't meet the requirements, even though I've specifically met all the requirements. So I'm working on that. Heathenwizards.com. And most of my interviews and things like that are on there. And some of my homemade products, if you're interested in those. Other than that, love you guys.
Yeah, definitely. I love you guys too. I really appreciate you guys being here. And if you can just stay fit, I'm just going to close off this stream. But
thanks for having me, James. I really appreciate this. I really do.
Oh, thank you, Richard. It's great to have you here. And I do hope that you'll stick around, Richard, because you and I were actually going to bring up a topic for the patron group, which is going to start just a second here. But
Okay.
right now, guys, I'm going to sign off to all of you out in YouTube live stream land. I'd like to thank our guests for being here. Lucas, thanks a lot. Richard, thanks a lot. Benjamin, always a pleasure. You guys have a beautiful Saturday. It is go time. You know what that means. Make it the best apocalypse ever. If you're not a patron, don't worry. You will still see what we're going to talk about. It's just that we're only letting the patrons come in to ask questions, because as you can see from the chat, sometimes a dick gets in the pool and they're wandering around going, I'm a dick in the pool. And so we have this idea of having this set up here where people can just come and we can just have some really good conversations. So we'll still be sharing all that with you, and I can't wait to bring it to you here in just a second. So happy day all. We'll see you shortly on the other side. If you guys don't know how to get into Patreon, just go to Patreon right now. You'll see it. It's the top link. Click on the link. You'll come into Zoom, and here you are. We'll be talking. I'm going to try and hang out as much as I can today, sort of like an office hours. So it'll be on and off.